My guest at this time is a former WWE NXT Tag Team Champion, one half of The Awakening. He's going to team with his partner Big Con to take on the Headbangers for the ARW Tag Team Championships at ARW's 4th anniversary show on February 19th. It's Vik The Spacelord. Vik.
Hell yeah, man.
Thank you.
That's me.
Did I get it right?
Yeah, you got it right.
Dude, that is such a badass moniker.
Just kind of popped up, I guess, a few years ago. Well, now it's more than a few years ago. It was when I first moved here, so it's just kind of stuck with me.
What's the origin? I'm intrigued. Are you just a big comic book fan? Like, where'd it come from?
I am a comic book fan, but it actually, it was Moxley that said it one day when we were training actually at Hard Knocks, and the song came on, and he just like looked at me and he was like, "I see you getting up in the morning, and just having this song playing, and you know, you walk out in your living room and just light a cigarette and start making eggs, and you know, you probably kick some girls out of your apartment or whatever." And I started laughing, and I was like, "Well, you're right about the cigarette and eggs, and definitely not kicking any girls out of my apartment at that time." So, and it just kind of stuck. Everybody just kind of like laughed, and it just always stuck. All the guys that were around just kept calling me that, and it's just, you know what I mean? It's just one of those things. It's more or less true. I don't know if I'm a lord of space, but I spend a lot of time out there.
I mean, technically, we're all floating around in space. So
Exactly.
I think you're right. I think it's a great moniker. Yeah, we'll start here with the ARW stuff, man. I am really on the hook here for you and the Headbangers. I like both of you guys a lot.
Yeah.
I know Big Con said that he had like some emotional connection here, especially with the Headbangers, you know, kind of growing up, you know, getting to know them on the indies and stuff. Do you have any memories of Headbangers? Do you know these guys at all?
I mean, I got to meet them because they came to Raw for a little while we were there. And I know we were in one match with them for sure. It was like so weird. I'll never forget that because I was standing on the apron with like Aiden English, Gotch, and the Headbangers. And I was like, and who are we looking at? There was like the Spirit Squad, like Mikey and which was the other one? Kenny, yes. Sorry, my bad.
Extra. No problem, man. You're talking. This is Survivor Series, I think you're talking about, right?
It was around that time, but I think it was just on Raw or SmackDown we had a match. And I just was thinking, like, this is so weird. Like, like I'm already like Aiden English and Gotch are on my team, and then I've got the Headbangers here too, and we were just like, this is weird. Like, what year is this? We're looking across the ring at, you know, Spirit Squad, and I think it was American Alpha and the Usos.
Yeah.
You know, I remember it was a really fun match, and it was cool to have them there. That's for sure. Because like when I grew up watching wrestling, like me and one of my buddies used to always try to steal their finish and do like the powerbomb leg drop onto our buddies through tables and other stuff that you're not supposed to do.
Yeah, the stage dive. They went in depth with me about how dangerous that maneuver can be if done wrong. And
Definitely,
They also said to me they feel that they are like the most underrated tag team of all time. They never get brought up in the discussion. Do you think does that resonate with you when you hear them make that complaint?
Possibly, now that I think about it. I feel like there's a lot of teams that get underrated for sure. But when I think about it, yeah, because like they didn't. I'm trying to remember. Like they didn't get, you know, a really like long run in my opinion. And they were super cool. Like when I was a kid, I loved those two guys. Like I remember playing Warzone, on my, you know, PS1, and like always being the Headbangers. So definitely, like it was. I would say they were in a tough time. You know what I mean? That was a transitioning point, kind of like that Attitude Era where like young guys like them were, you know, had to deal with a lot of struggles against like the older guys. Like it was just the lay of the land, you know, and even just hearing stories from all sorts of guys like that, like Edge and Christian, the Hardy Boys, like even, you know, Matt and Mike. So Matt and Brian, sorry. I have a hard time remembering everybody's real names because I haven't used them for forever.
Fine.
So
we're reliving these things right now. Well, I mean, it's interesting because they were, you know, kind of one of the last bastions of the territory days before they, you know, wound up over in WWE. And you guys, of course, were part of like really what was the first wave of what is now NXT. And we get to that here in just a second. But man, I was looking into you, Vik, and I did not know that you trained at the Hart Dungeon.
That was where I started. Yeah.
Can you just, before we get to anything else, can you talk to me a little bit about what it was like to train at the Hart Dungeon?
Sure. I mean, like I was such a huge wrestling fan when I was a kid. I grew up in a very small town in northern Alberta, and I don't know. I was just always kind of like a little rebel headbanger, I suppose, and I didn't really know what to do with myself other than me and my, one of my best friends, a couple of my best friends, like we just always loved wrestling. Like we had gotten back into it as teenagers, and we were always messing around, and I was just kind of trying to figure out what I was going to do with the rest of my life, and kind of like everybody was like, "You should try being a wrestler. You should try being a wrestler." And I was like, "We live in nowhere where, you know what I mean? Like this doesn't exist. Like I think just before, like within the year before I had moved to Calgary, we started getting an indie company. It was called Can-Am Wrestling, where I actually first met Dr. Luther back in the
Oh,
day." Um, and they would run a couple shows at this place called BJ's Sports Club up there. And immediately, like me and my friends, like we just go try to talk to the wrestlers like after the show and stuff. And I met a bunch of the dudes. There was like Mike McFly and there's Luther and a little Alberta Canadian legend was Steve Gillespie, and there was a few other guys.
okay.
But everybody was super cool, and just like they were like, "Oh, well, we can train you." And I was like, "Well, actually, I just signed up for the dungeon or whatever." And they're like, "Oh, okay, good luck." I was like, "Huh?" And they're like, "You're gonna need it." I was like, "Okay." And like from what I can say, that gave me like I spent about 7 years training with them and everything. I lived in Calgary for about 7 years at that time. And so like we were always kind of training on and off and like doing shows, and
Because you
it
were
was just such a great experience. Like
because you were doing Stampede Wrestling then at the same time you were training the Hart Dungeon. Is that right?
yeah. Like I trained for about 3 or 4 months, I think, before I actually got to start going out, and they would do tours back then, like right in early 2000 was when I started, and we would go tour around Alberta and Saskatchewan and stuff, and it was just so awesome. Like there was so many cool guys to work with, and just getting to learn. Like it was such a difference too, because when we were at the dungeon, we weren't usually in the ring. We were in the dungeon,
Like
and like it was.
the actual dungeon where Stu
Oh
Hart
yeah,
stretched greenies as he
oh
did
yeah,
it. Yeah, okay.
yeah. Yeah, he used to come down sometimes, and it'd be funny because you'd be dying from practice or something, and he'd go out to they're dark, just horrible looking basement. It was just so scary looking as a kid. It's funny to think about it, and I can remember like watching Stu. He'd have to walk kind of backwards, like he'd crawl backwards down these stairs, like these super old like iron stairs that came down into the basement. And he'd be crawling down. He'd see you, and he'd be like, "Oh, hey kid, sounds like there's really something going on down here today. Maybe I should show somebody some stuff, you know." And you'd be like, "Oh shit, Stu's in here today." And then he'd come down and he'd sugar hold somebody or grind his stubbly old chin into somebody's eye sockets for a little while. And
Is
go,
that what
yeah.
you went through? Did you get sugared? Did you get knocked out by
No,
Stu? No.
so Stu never did it to me. It was always odd because he'd be telling me a story about something, or he'd be like, "You got hands like so and so," and I can't ever remember who he'd say. And then he'd grab whoever was next to me and do something to him, but he would never do it to me. Like he took one of my best friends at the time one day and was like, "Here, come here," and he just like sugared him and passed him out right there. And I was like, "Holy shit!"
Uh, that's like psychological torture, man. That's really it's like
Kinda, yeah. Well, like Bruce had his own forms in the dungeon that was usually pretty funny. Like I'll remember, like might have been one of my first days in there, and this was one of Bruce's favorite things to do. Was he'd be like, he'd make you do these weird scenarios for some reason, like, and it was trying to get usually like an emotional reaction out of you, because usually like everybody that shows up their first day, they're just terrified and nervous, and it'd be like, "All right, well, do something where like you two are about to get in a fight and you slap them," and you'd be like, "What? Like just slap a guy?" And I'd be like, "Yeah, just walk up and slap him. It'll be funny." Like, "Oh, okay, that's not," and you'd go to do it, and it was never hard enough. Nobody ever slapped whoever it was hard enough.
oh,
And so then Bruce would start laughing, and he'd get a little bit closer, and he'd start explaining everything to you, and he'd be like, "All you got to do is just you just gotta take your hand, you just cup it real good like this, and you keep it soft. And he'd always like start to show you, and he'd almost be looking at the other guy, talking about it. And as you would get into it, all of a sudden he'd just boom, haul off and slap you in the face. And he'd be like, "What the fuck?" Like, and like that would always get the react. Like you would always. I'd seen so many people just immediate red, like so much anger because they didn't know how to respond. They want to like obviously punch him, but they don't because he's your trainer and you just paid him a shit ton of money to learn how to wrestle.
Wow.
So, but that was a constant one. Or Bruce had a way of doing an eye poke that he would explain the same way, where he didn't poke you in the eye, but he'd smack you in the face. And so like no matter what, you'd be like, "What the motherfucker?" Like he had a lot of dirty little tricks he liked to play on people. So
wow.
but it was pretty cool. I got like a real good education on how to protect myself in wrestling, because Bruce had a lot of stories of people fucking him up all the time because he was an asshole.
Yeah.
So it was good because he'd always be like, "Do it this way," or "Do it this way." He goes, "I had somebody mess me up doing it this way or that way and whatnot." And it took a while before I kind of understood, like once they started traveling and like you'd meet people who knew Bruce and how much they hated him.
Oh my God. So wait, so did you train with Harry then? Did I read this right or no?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. When I think when I started, Harry used to lie about his age. And so I don't know if he was 14 or if he was 16 at the time. I can never remember because he used to always lie.
Wow.
But he was such a tall, skinny kid and just a total shit disturber. And like I bonded with him and TJ actually pretty quick because they were both awesome already at their age, and they were just so much fun kind of to be around and stuff. And so like we would always train together, and we had a pretty good crew. Like I'd say in the first year I was actually in the dungeon, I probably saw 100 kids come and go, and there was a handful that maybe stayed out of all those people.
Wow.
So,
dude, that's fine. So like I don't just kind of quick on your take, like what Harry, I mean, he seems like he's kind of assumed the mantle of Stu Hart in a lot of ways. I see the way he wrestles.
definitely.
So you agree with that? You think that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, he's so traditional, which is awesome because there isn't a lot of people I think that have kind of like that same mindset,
Yeah.
and he's very traditional, and he always really loved kind of every aspect of wrestling, not just being the entertainment side of it. Like he just loves wrestling. The guy would, even still go, and he just, once he started traveling and getting out and just doing stuff, he just never stopped. He'd be like, "Oh, wrestling," and then he'd go work with Josh Barnett to learn how to, fight and stuff like that. And then he's always taking advantage of anybody he can learn from. Like I was super jealous when he got to meet Billy Robinson and just kind of learn some stuff from him. And I was just like, "Oh man, like, damn, you're lucky." So, but he keeps going at it. He just loves it. And I'd say like he embodies the sport probably more than anybody, really looking at it, because he's just very, very wrestling, and it's awesome. And he's such a great personality. Like I watched that guy change so much over the years, but not ever has it ever been for the worst. That's always just more hilarious and more fun and more better. So.
Yeah. Yeah, no, Harry's a cool dude. I don't ever have to get in the ring with him, thank God. He's always...
I hope I get to again soon. I remember like way back in Stampede, there was one time both of us were just obsessed with power bombs, and I loved the Wild Pegasus bomb, and he was in love with like the Liger bomb or something like that. And so we had a match where we both gave one to each other, and I remember when I gave him the Pegasus bomb, he goes, "You win." Oh, and I laughed, and I don't know if we ever power bombed each other again after that. But
wow, of all the accolades, beating Harry Smith in a power bomb contest,
like that was a long time ago. It wouldn't happen nowadays. He's way too damn big. Jesus.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if in a cage in a wrestling ring, I don't know where he'll be next, but he's a very scary man.
Yeah.
I mean, at the Awakening versus the New Hart Foundation, Harry and Brian Pillman Jr. would be a lot of fun, but I know Pillman's off doing stuff now.
Yeah, I just saw him on AEW. I think it was last week or this week. I can't remember which one I saw him on.
Him and he's part of the Varsity Blondes. Him and Danny Limelight took on Omega and the Good Brothers.
Oh yeah, that's what it was. I did catch that. Yeah. So, and he he was looking good. You know, I remember when I heard about him starting, and I was like, oh, that should be interesting. And the little bit I watched, I was like, damn, yeah, he's a lot like his dad. So,
Yeah, and it's fun. I talked to him a little, just kind of, I don't know, we're going to love the beaten path here. I'm very into that.
it's
I love
fun.
the hearts and everything like that. So I'm fascinated with all these stories. But, you know, he got, you know, similar kind of breaking in via Harry when they kind of got hooked up. I know training got
Yeah.
upped a little bit. The intensity got up to standard.
Oh yeah.
You know,
Well, I mean, we had a Japanese trainer, Tokyo Joe, for numerous years that we were so thankful for, and he really, like, when I said Stu didn't stretch me, well, he made up for that because, man, he my joints still hurt. And I was, I was young back then. Like, we were all real young. Like, I was only, I think, 3 years kind of into wrestling by the time, like, Tokyo Joe took us in, and he just kind of really reformed us. Like, that was some really brutal training, because, like, we used to train with him 5 to 7 days a week, depending if someone was going to Japan or not. And you'd spend like 2 hours working out or something like that, and then we'd wrestle for like 2 or 3 hours, and then you'd work out for a while, and then he'd have to go take him for lunch, and then take him home, and then go dive for a while. And some days then afterwards, we'd have to go to the dungeon afterwards, and like 3 or 4 of us would just be there like dying, and Bruce would be like, "What is wrong with you guys?" And we're like, oh, "We just got our asses kicked all day."
he comes over and he smacks you in the face.
Yeah, pretty much. Be like, "Oh, get in there with whoever and do this," and we'd just be like, "Oh, okay." So
It sounds more like a POW camp than like a wrestling training facility, the way you describe it.
I mean, a little bit. Like, we used to say, like, it wasn't so much with Bruce. Bruce had his own style, which was very effective, and Tokyo Joe was very much like old-fashioned Japanese training. Like, he was a guy that had been, like, when he was 12, I think he started sumo wrestling or something like that. If he wasn't younger when he started, and he could just never get big enough. So I think by the time he was like 16, they had him start pro wrestling instead. And so when we started training with him, he was like 65 or something like that. And you know what I mean? Like, the guy just had a lifetime worth of wrestling knowledge, and he was awesome. But like, we'd say we would go home, and like, you'd still hear his voice in your head. And like, you'd go home and like try to go to sleep, and you'd have dreams about him yelling at you or whatever. And it was like, holy crap, like, get him out of my head. So,
I watch too many Scientology docs. You're describing like David Miscarriage or something like that.
oh, not nearly. I've seen a lot of that stuff, and at least. And so here's the other thing too. He is the only coach that would not take money. He would never take money, because he said if he charged us and he didn't want to train us, he would still have the obligation to train us because of money. And he goes, I don't want your guys' money, because if you piss me off, I'm going to tell you to fuck off. And so there was one day I remember he got mad about something. I can't remember if we were late to pick him up, and we had to beg him to come train. We had showed up, and he had just told us to get lost. And I remember, like, we got back in the car, and it was like TJ, and I'm pretty sure it was TJ and another guy named Dave Swift, who we had all started with. And we were sitting in my car. It's like, what do we do, man? Like, Joe's super pissed. And I think it was something innocent that had caused us to be late, but he was just like angry that morning. And so I think we had gone back and kind of explained it to him. He was like, fine, all right. Like, and came and he whipped our ass for a few hours, but then he'd be fine. Like, he'd be mad at you for a little while. And if you train good, he's the happiest guy in the world. He was happy with his boys. So.
Cool. Well, thank you for the talk about the dungeon. So were you, I mean, I guess to put a pin on it, were you part of the last class then? Were you one of the last students to be trained out of the dungeon then?
Yes, I am. I believe I am the last now, other than there's a couple guys still up in Canada. Like, he used to be called Randy Myers. I can't remember if he still is. I know he's out on the West Coast, and he was one of the last kids that's still out there as well. Like, other than TJ, Natty, and Harry. So.
Sure. Wow, man.
That's and like Johnny Devine was one of them too. I know he still does stuff from here and there. I just haven't talked to him for a while.
Yeah, he shows up on some. I haven't seen him on any recent posters or anything, but I know he still does the indies and stuff too. Yeah. Dude, wow. I'm like, I had to hold my breath at points and while you were telling that story, dude. So you go to, I know you go to New Japan, you do the indies before you wind up in FCW. Like, was FCW easier? Was this better? Was this a vacation for you considering what you had just gone through?
No, FCW was a whole new world. Like I'd spent 3 years previous in OVW, kind of like I wasn't under contract, but I got there, I think maybe like about within the last year before WWE pulled out. And then I was there for a couple of years afterwards, but Danny Davis still ran it exactly the same. Um, like everything he taught us was kind of how they had already done the developmental system there, how he ran the show. So I already knew what I was getting into when I went to FCW, other than the politics of it all, I guess I would say. Um, and it wasn't a cakewalk. Like we were really, those were long days. We didn't have a lot of days off because we'd always, whether you're in the mornings or in the afternoons, usually you would go to Hard Knocks like afterwards and work out. And it was like a 9 to 5 because we were there all morning or there all afternoon. And by the time you got home, you know what I mean? It was like 5 or 6 o'clock and you're dead.
Yeah.
And then most of the time you'd go home and sit there and watch wrestling all night, trying to figure out whatever it was that you needed to do that day.
Yeah.
So it was far from a cakewalk. There was a lot of
You were
mental gymnastics in FCW, I'd say.
But you were working with a lot of great talent. I mean, that's kind of,
Yeah.
a golden era for FCW. I know you had Rollins down there at that time.
Yeah.
I think you and Connor took the titles from Corey Graves and like Pac. And I read that and I was like, what a
Yes.
random tag team pairing. I've got to go back and find this match now.
Yeah. I can't remember exactly how they got paired together. It was so funky at the time, and we were all dealing with so much stuff. Like it was more mentally challenging, I'd say, than anything. Like I suffered a couple little like minor injuries while I was there. I guess I had just started rolling. This was kind of before I got put in Ascension. I'd been working with Seth a ton, and I was in like a 3-way dance with him and Leo Kruger somewhere like 3 hours north of here. And it was like one of the very last things in the match. And Seth was just throwing me back into the ring. And I remember my knee just suddenly gave out when I went to stand up, and it finished the match. And it was such a good match. It was really good. We had so much fun. I just remember like somebody being like, "Man, this is so much fun." I go, "Yeah, I'm not walking out of here." And so then after that, it was kind of like a weird scramble where I was almost in the Wyatt family for a little while.
Really?
And yeah, and then after that got shut down, it was Hunter that eventually was like, well, Hunter under the suggestion of Norman Smiley, who had been saying it for years, and Billy Kidman, who said, "Hey, Vik should be in the Ascension." So that was kind of how that happened. And that was all as NXT had already kind of it had already formed, but we were still in Tampa. We hadn't moved to Orlando yet. So
Yeah, you guys were really, because you guys were, you became the tag champions there, and you held the titles. Like I said, you were a big part of that first wave of NXT because you guys are the longest reigning NXT tag team champions of all time.
Yep. Yeah.
Dude, how does that feel to know that you hold that very prestigious honor?
I have a lot of mixed feelings about it.
Tell
I think
me.
I was laughing about it with Connor the other day because we were like, I can't believe they haven't gotten rid of that yet. Because I was sure that they were going to get rid of it at one point. Like I thought it was going to be FTR or AOP, because I know both of them had super long reigns, and I was sure that I was like, one of them's going to get it. And then they never did, and I was really surprised at that. And I think it's just the fact, like WWE did their best to forget about us being the NXT champ, like the longest reigning NXT champions. Like I remember some of the commentators saying that they were never allowed to bring it up again on commentary.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's more or less why I have mixed feelings on it. You know what I mean? And I remember the time for me and Connor, it looked one way to everybody else, and it was really a completely different way to the two of us. So
And how was that process for you finding out you're going to go move from NXT to the main roster? Were you excited? Did it become nerve-wracking? Like what was that transition like for you? What do you recall from that?
When Hunter told us, we were in a weird meeting one day. We were in the performance center, and like a bunch of the coaches were all in there with us, and we were just going to do a video conference with them or whatever. And so like they tell us, and everybody starts cheering, and I was just kind of sitting there because really like I just had the last 15 years, I think it was about 15 years flash before my eyes of everything, and I was just kind of trying to take it in. And I remember Hunter saying, he was like, man, everybody looks really happy except for Viktor. And I had just kind of gone into space because I was just like, holy shit, like, you actually said it. All right, it's finally happening. And then, I kind of started laughing. I'm like, no, dude, I'm just blown away. Like, I was just amazed. And then they showed us the picture of the stupid gear that they were going to make us wear. And I was like, cool, this is downhill already. So.
Yeah. That's got, I mean, because you got, I mean, how was it? I mean, you guys came out, you cut that promo, bashing all the other tag teams. Connor rips Hawk. Everybody's pissed at you. Emotionally, like that had to be pretty damaging, I would think.
I mean, at the time, I said I didn't care because I'm like, it's not real. Like, we don't feel this way about like any of these legends. Like, it's just trying to get us heat. And so it didn't really bother me because I didn't mean any of like what we said. And it really bothered Connor because he had to like say a bunch of the stuff that he didn't want to. And to me, I'm like, well, it's not real. We don't feel this way. So like when we started seeing kind of the response, like the company was kind of blind to the response that the fans gave us, as they are in many cases. Like it took them forever to realize that we weren't bad guys anymore. It took them forever. Like I can remember Michael Hayes saying to us after we cut a promo one day on NXT, and he was like, I don't get it. You guys are cutting a heel promo, but the fans are reacting to you like baby faces. And we're like, Michael, you haven't realized that people have been cheering for us for like 6 months? I just don't get it. We're going to have to do something about that. And we're like, okay. And I can remember I'm trying to remember which match it was. I can't remember which one it was now, but we came back and Pat Patterson was standing there clapping. This is the only time he ever did this, for me anyway. And he goes, oh my God, I love it, you guys. I love it. You guys used to be the biggest badass heels now, and now you're just the biggest badass baby faces. It's so good. And like, we're like, yeah, okay, cool. Like, thanks. People are starting to notice. And then even when we got the first time we came up, our very first live event together for WWE was in Madison Square Garden right after the first takeover. And both super nervous, just being like, man, I don't know what people are going to think or whatever. And as we walked up to MSG, like there's so many fans outside and they just all started chanting for us. And we're like, holy shit, this is crazy.
Yeah, I mean, well, you guys NXT one was awesome. You had a kick-ass finisher, like one look, and then you got brought up to the main roster, and they told you to piss off these tag teams, and they gave you a million different symbolisms type things in your entrance. Everything. I'm always so interested in all the symbolism with you guys because I have this theory that Vince and Hunter and these guys insert all these weird symbols throughout all their shows and stuff. You guys seem to be like
no, they didn't. No, we sent them about 100 different logos at one point in time because I initially we all had the eye. Right. And then the one that wound up on our t-shirt was one I actually had made on gear. And then they told us, oh, we need you guys to maybe change the logo and we'll do, figure out something else. Me and Connor went through thousands of esoteric symbols and things like that, like the two of us, and submitted them all to the point where they're like, okay, stop. Like, don't send us any more. And we're like, okay. And so this was before the first takeover, I think. Because then all of a sudden, like, we didn't even know that they were making t-shirts for us. And yeah, it was one of the first takeovers. All of a sudden, they just brought us the shirt. And they're like, hey, here's your shirt. And we're like, that's our logo? They're like, yeah, you like it? Like, yeah, I already had gear with it on there, and you told me not to make any more. Like, that was the kind of thing we used to deal with. Like, a lot of it's silly.
So when you
And
move from NXT to the main roster, did you at least make more money? Do you get a new contract when you go to the main roster?
made so much more money that first year was great.
So wait, so is it like, is the handoff there where it's like you're leaving NXT, we need you to sign a new contract, or do you have to like wait for it to roll over? Like, how does that work?
So a lot of people back then used to get to double dip, where they would still, you wouldn't sign a new contract yet, but you would get like a month or two on the road usually, where like your hotels and cars were taken care of, and you would get paid per show that you were doing or whatever, but then you'd still make whatever you were making in NXT. Like that was still your contract. And so for most guys, it was pretty sweet when you'd go because you were like, cool, I really don't have to pay for anything. And I'm just making extra money from being on the road. And then so it's kind of how everything worked for me and Connor. The minute we got up, that stopped. Like it was immediately, we came up that week and here's your new contract. Everything switches. You have to pay for everything yourselves. And like the thing was, I think we kind of said, well, hey, like, doesn't most guys usually get taken care of for a little while? And they're like, oh, okay, well, yeah, I guess since you're not like used to that road yet, well, I think they got our cars and hotels for about a month. And by the end of that, we were like, cool, I don't want their hotels anymore.
Okay. Yeah, because that's nice to hear you at least had a little negotiating. They didn't just say, sign this, we own you. Like, they're like, okay.
Yeah, well, they do say that, but
okay.
that was our one negotiation thing. So, but I know everything had switched because everybody that kind of came up after us all had kind of the immediate switch. Wow. And so I think, like, oddly enough, I think when we signed our new contract, when we first came up, was almost exactly 5 years to the date that I had signed with NXT.
Wow. Damn. Well, Vik, this has been a great chat. I'm really, again, everybody should go check out ARW 4th anniversary show. You guys taking on the Headbangers. I'd love to bring you and Connor back. There's other stuff that, you know, from y'all's career would be really fun to.
Oh yeah, we can talk forever. That's for sure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you guys got more matches ahead. I'm always happy to help you promote the next big match. So let's keep a little here to the side for next time. But
gotcha.
for now, Vik, like, what do you want to plug, promote, put over here? Do you want to tell people where they can go find ARW here on the 19th?
I forgot to look at the thing, but I know I follow them on Instagram and all the other stuff. So does Connor. You know, we have a big thanks to Alex Red for bringing us in. That was one of the main things we wanted to say about that. You know, you can. So that's like our second thing coming up. Like next Sunday, I believe, January 30th, we'll be in El Paso for Cinta Del Rio. I'm probably saying that wrong. I want to call him De Oreo all the time, but I know that's wrong. Okay. Well, we've got that. That's aemg.com, I think. And yeah, man, things are gonna start rolling. We're looking forward to it. We've kind of been locked up too long, and we need to start beating people up again.